Reversing Language Shift in a Cree Community in Canada. This is a presentation based on about 10 years of work that I conducted in a community called Cumberland House in northern Saskatchewan. For this presentation, I want to talk a bit about what language shift is, give you a brief overview of Aboriginal language loss in Canada, give you a bit of information about Cree, a description of the Cree bilingual program, a description of what participatory action research is, the results of the longitudinal study, that is 7 years worth of work, and some insights, explanations, and ongoing questions. So let's begin with what language shift is. Language use refers to the language that one uses on an everyday basis. When one lives in a dual language community, a language shift can occur from the use of one everyday language to another. So language shift occurs when there are demographically smaller numbers of users and the process of the outflow of users is greater than that of the inflow. In other words, sadly, those who speak the language are passing away or leaving the community, and the number of new speakers is decreasing. Reversing language shift is a complex and long-term process that needs to be addressed at a number of levels. One is changes in social use, that is the habits of communicating in the language. Second is the changes in ritualistic use, meaning the use of the language for certain seasonal events or weekly events. Changes in the economic value of language use. So it could be that people switch using languages because the other language is the one that is going to be more economically advantageous to them. And changes in technological integration of the language. The best known researcher in this area would be Joshua Fishman, who in 1991 wrote, "Societally based reversing language shift, or RLS, cannot be accomplished at all if it is not accomplished at the intimate family and local community levels." So let's talk a bit now about Aboriginal language loss in Canada. In 1998, Norris wrote, "During the past 100 years or more, nearly 10 once flourishing languages have become extinct. At least a dozen are on the brink of extinction. When these languages vanish, they take with them unique ways of looking at the world, explaining the unknown and making sense of life." And I would add, particularly at the ecological level. There are 53 First Nations languages in Canada. A 1992 National Language Survey of First Nations communities found that 11% had critical language use or loss. That means that there were fewer than 10 speakers or no known speakers in that community. 30% of those communities were living with what we might call endangered languages, that is, less than 50% of the adults speak the language, and there are fewer, if any, younger speakers. Or that 80% of the older population speak the language, and there are no identified speakers under the age of 45. 28% of communities indicated what we'd call declining languages. That means at least 50% of the adults and a lesser percent of young people are speakers of that language. 18% would be in the category of enduring languages, that is, over 60% are still fluent speakers, and 12% had flourishing languages. Over 80% are fluent speakers and literate. In 1951 in Canada, 87.4% of Aboriginal people had an Aboriginal language as their mother tongue. In 1986, 29.3% of Aboriginal people had an Aboriginal language as their mother tongue. In 1991, only 36% of adults over the age of 15 and 21% of children spoke an Aboriginal language. And these are all based on Statistics Canada data. By 1996, 51% of adults and 71% of children reported never having spoken an Aboriginal language. Some languages have a chance to survive. Cree is one of them. Let's look a bit at the Aboriginal population in Canada. 1/3 of the Aboriginal population is aged 14 or under. Just over 1.3 million people reported having at least some Aboriginal ancestry in the 2001 census, representing about 4.4% of the total population. In 1996, people with Aboriginal ancestry represented 3.8% of the total population, so that you see it is actually a growing population. 24% of Aboriginal people could conduct a conversation in an Aboriginal language in 2001, and that's down 5% from the 1996 census. Regular use of a language is key to maintaining its vitality. About 9 out of every 10 people with knowledge of Canada's most widely spoken 4 languages reported that they spoke the language at home, indicating that they use it at least regularly. That's not as true of Aboriginal languages. 1 in 5 Aboriginal people moved in the past 5 years, so they're a very transient population. 14% of the population of Saskatchewan in central and western Canada is Aboriginal, and predictions are that 50% of the school population in Saskatchewan will be of Aboriginal background by the year 2015. Now, let's look a little bit at the Cree language. It's considered linguistically a Central Algonquin language. This means that the words were once described by the linguist Edward Sapir as resembling tiny imagist poems. In other words, some words are very, very long because they are used to describe exactly poetry in the making. It has animate and inanimate gender markers and pronoun markers. So the first person plural is inclusive, 2/3 persons referred to in the same context. It uses both Roman orthography and Cree syllabics in its written form. There are about 50,000 speakers of Cree, although they can be divided into a variety of dialects. And in this study, the community speaks what's called the Swampy Cree dialect or the N dialect. The belief of the people that use this language is that language is a gift of the Creator. So a little bit more context about where the study took place. It took place in Northern Lights School Division, and which is a school division that occupies the northernmost part of the province of Saskatchewan, approximately half actually of that province. The schools in Northern Lights School Division range from 12 to 500 students per school, and they cater to Cree, Dene, Métis, French, and English cultures. Progressively, pilot programs are unique in Cree or Aboriginal language development or maintenance, and the school division is increasing its use of technology. This is a picture of the first school in the community where this study took place. It's called Charlebois School, and it was erected by Father Charlebois in 1890. The logs and labor used in constructing the building were donated by the local residents. This is a picture of the current school, and it's also known as a community school, which means that the community has access to all parts of the building for physical education activities, craft activities, etc. after hours. It is a Métis Cree community. They applied to be selected for this pilot project and were successful. And 80% of the staff are from the community and speak the local dialect. It is also a K-12 school, although different wings cater to the elementary versus the junior or secondary, senior high school. They have quite a strong community identity, and language is still spoken fluently by those over 40 years of age. The road to RLS has been a rocky road. Some characteristics of this rocky road would begin with a description of what Fishman called the graded intergenerational disruption scale. In other words, when you're going into a community and you want to see the degree to which language shift has occurred, you can divide it into 8 stages. So the stage that would be the most critical would be stage 8, where only the seniors speak the language. Stage 7 means that the language is used by seniors, but it might also be used for rituals and modest intergenerational visiting. Stage 6 would be still more positive because there would be interfamily interaction and interaction between generations. Stage 5 would be where you see guided literacy development. Now, when RLS was first developed, it was used in communities that did not necessarily have the strong oral tradition that Aboriginal language communities have. So guided literacy would have meant that some speakers of the language still spoke, but maybe didn't read or write. In this case, the reading and writing is something that has grown in value in the last century. Stage 4, you see that language would also be used in the elementary school. And that really means that there would have been public acknowledgement that a language was in a state that needed to be revived, and the state had been convinced of the value of offering the language in their public schools. By stage 3, you see that not only has language grown in use, and by its being used in the elementary school, this means that young people would be growing up speaking the language. And probably the most critical age is between 15 and 24, because 15 to 24 represents childbearing years. And if a woman can speak the language well in those years, then the woman is more likely to pass the language on, and that could become a mother tongue or one of 2 languages a child grows up with. If the childbearing years meet with parents who cannot speak the language, then another generation goes without that language. So being able to use the language in the workplace and in the school, and then in stage 2, broadly in the media and post-secondary level, stage 1, means that you are creating a community in which the language can be used broadly for many, many purposes, both educationally, in the workplace, and in the world of entertainment. So, to begin this Cree bilingual program, a number of factors had to be considered. The first one was legal, and the province of Saskatchewan did have to pass laws that enabled the use of language to be as a language of instruction in the elementary years. There were ethical issues of marginalisation. For example, would this program hurt children's English language development, their literacy levels? Did parents agree to the participation of their children, or were they co-opted because of community pressure? And what would happen in a community where you've only got 1 classroom per grade if you had one family who didn't want to participate in the program? And then there were also pedagogic issues. That is, it's one thing for a teacher to be able to speak the language fluently. It's another for them to actually be trained to teach in the language to people who do not speak the language. And so that requires a whole methodology, not to mention resource development. It's one thing, again, to perhaps have stories to share with speakers, but when you're going to be learning subject content, you really do need to have the appropriate resources. So the Cree bilingual program began in 1999 with a cohort of 22 children. And in that kindergarten year, they heard 100% Cree in their half days. As it moved into grades 1 to 3, 50% of the instruction took place in Cree and 50% took place in English. There were no resources or direct research to build upon, although there was related research and there were a few resources. Everything had to be recreated and adapted. So that meant that there was a lot of trial and error that took place. There was annual testing of the children's Cree and English language development, and that was very important for reporting back to the community, reporting back to other communities who were eyeing this very closely as an option for their schools, and of course to the school board. Annual interviews took place with administrators, teachers, parents, community members, and the children. What we noticed was there was a growth in the self-esteem of children in the Cree bilingual program, and that was particularly noted initially by the resource room teacher, who happened not to be from that community and didn't speak Cree. And she noticed that the children who were coming to resource room in the first year of the program seemed to enjoy learning more, seemed to be much more positive generally towards the learning in the school. There was a resurgence of self-determination, and that was very exciting to be able to see parents come out for meetings with questions and with creative opportunities that they would like to provide. And probably most encouraging would be the memories that they were able to share. It was as if this program unlocked memories that they had from being children that they would like to be able to pass on to their children or the children in the community. Lingering in the background at all times was the question of sustainability. By 2005, all children in the K-6 program were in the school were in a bilingual program. So 50% of the school day had instruction in Cree. The junior high students were taking Cree as a subject, as were the senior high students, and there had begun a night class for parents. And the process of permission to publish some of the translated materials had also taken place. So really there was a great deal of community investment in trying to develop a stream that would enable children and families in the community to use more and more Cree. The methodology used over the course of this study would be what we call participatory action research, which traces the growth, the changes, and the challenges faced by individuals and institutions and their responses. There's participatory action research involves teamwork, and in this case, the researcher was a team member. It records change systematically, but not by setting a hypothesis or working in a linear fashion. I would say that PAR means expecting the unexpected, because that's the way life is. The formal dimension of the study was a 5-year longitudinal study from 1999 to 2003, but it is ongoing. Participatory action research goes through a cycle of 4 steps: reflect, plan, act, observe, and then reflect again. Reflection leads to asking about what needs to be done, questioning why, that is really being certain, planning what to do, by whom, carrying out the plan, collecting data and evidence, observing, monitoring, recording, and then re-entering that cycle. So during the course of 5 years, this cycle went on many times. Results. Well, what has happened over 7 years? Shifting priorities, evolution. Year 1 focused on research, preparation, gathering community support. Year 2 on the survival of the program, proving that it would work, and building an excitement over the new. The year 3 really saw pride in the successes. The school was clearly beginning to function at 2 levels. In fact, the children in the Cree bilingual program were enjoying a very high status among all of the Cree communities in that part of Saskatchewan, partly because they were entering language and culture contests, and they were just winning left, right, and center. By year 4, things had been changing a little bit. they began, the participants, the teachers and administrators began to feel like they knew what they were doing. There were resources in place. They had centers, language experience charts, there was a curriculum. And so that was a bit of a relief. By year 5, there was expansion and creating both school equilibrium and community equilibrium. Year 6 saw the survival of that expansion, and so in a way you can see that cycle beginning to re-emerge. Year 7 saw a greater focus on oral language development and the recognition that they had to take that seriously, because while the children could understand and while they could sing songs and recite prayers and poems, they weren't actually speaking spontaneously. So what has changed over these 7 years? Teachers, elders, children, resource development, the school, and the community. Some of what happened was planned, and we see, for example, that we needed to build an infrastructure with a variety of roles and responsibilities. And that takes time. And so this was a planned and intended building process, from making sure that there was an Aboriginal speaking administrator to an internal consultant, that there was an experienced mentor teacher who could mentor new teachers into the program, and that there were materials that were being developed by someone with more and more experience who became a program developer and would be able to help train teachers and give them access. The elders continued to play an increasingly more important role in the program and would mentor, of course, new teachers. This was a key to its sustainability and its future. The external consultant was designed to be phased out. That would be a sign of the capacity building. Cree was used to teach and play games, and that would have been new to that community. The Project in Action Research Project not only explained the things that were planned, but some of what happened was expected and some was not. So we expected that the changes that would take place could lead to some school unease. Teachers who didn't speak Cree began to worry as the program expanded, would they still have jobs? Was there security for them? They began to feel a sense of inequality of work, partly because the Cree bilingual program did have time allotted for some resource development, and other teachers wondered why they didn't get the time. But of course, not all the teachers understood that there were no resources to begin with, and so there was a need for educating and for developing some overall school team building activities. That feeling of privileges being allotted to one group over another. We expected also that there would be a changing identity in the community, particularly vis-a-vis the notion of marginalization. So as the Cree speakers in the community became more aware of language loss, they became also more aware of the experiences that they had had and why that marginalization had taken place. So there was a rise of awareness about negative ESL experiences, about racism, and the hope that the children in the Cree program would not, in fact, have to relive those things that their parents had lived through, or grandparents. So some of what happened was serendipitous, and happily many of those things did occur. Let's begin with Bertha, who was the kindergarten teacher who moved on to grade 1, 2, 3, and has taught many grades in that school. Bertha began with 21 years of teaching experience. She was excited at the beginning, but also filled with uncertainty. She looked for resources when she found that none was available initially. She was filled with uncertainty until she then realized that many kindergarten materials can be used in Cree because puzzles and games are not language specific. She began speaking English and Cree, but soon realized that through gestures and through practice on a daily basis, that the students would be able to understand if she only spoke Cree. When she began the program, she had a vision, and that was to create a Cree basal reader. And of course, if you think of Bertha, that would represent what Bertha had used in her learning of English. She found that the emphasis on songs and prayers was very useful. It created excellent pronunciation, and then that yielded prizes for many of the children in the program. She emphasized reading and spelling because she felt that those were very important aspects of language development, and again, not unlike what she would have experienced in her day of learning English. She followed suggestions that were offered by the consultant or other workshops that she attended, such as creating centers, using a language experience approach. But it wasn't always sustained. Because Bertha was the only teacher in the Cree bilingual program, she often experienced isolation. Sometimes she reported that she might even have felt ostracized, left out of other decisions, because in fact, she wasn't understood in terms of what she was facing. She struggled to develop oral language. She found that pictures did help, and eventually realized that children must develop the habit of speaking in Cree in kindergarten, because if it doesn't come at the beginning of the program, it's going to be very hard to turn around. Meet Anna, who became one of the key resource developers. Anna entered the program with over 21 years of teaching experience. She had a focus and passion on learning to read in primary grades and had worked as a beginning or a primary level literacy teacher. She was familiar with resources and was constantly on the lookout for resources, books that could be translated into Cree. She believed at the core of her philosophy that she wanted to share the creativity and humor that is an inherent part of the Cree culture. She struggled to develop materials not only because there were no real second language models that she could follow, but because she was a developer for another teacher. And it's different when you're a teacher developing resources for your own students. So we did have to change some of her tasks as the program continued by giving her permission to observe every day so she could get to know the students, and that made it easier for her to develop, and also where she could actually teach the students. And I thought that was an excellent example of that embodied sense of being a teacher. She took inventory of everything that had been created through a variety of workshops, and that included games, following different themes, many getting it activities, and that was what led her then to becoming a full-time developer. But despite the fact that she could translate books and adapt them to the Cree culture, she really struggled with how to develop oral materials for oral language development. She found pictures she used to learn English, and that seemed to help her, and those were the Peabody visuals. And she realized that she needed to integrate or thematize materials into units. Meet Lily. Lily was nicknamed the Visionary. She was an assistant principal in the school. She also had over 20 years of teaching experience and was the high school Cree teacher. She understood the need to get students to talk and how from her work teaching high school. And she had a number of young children in the Cree bilingual program and actually made a language shift in her home from using English to using Cree, and both her and her husband were fluent in Cree. During the 5-year stretch, Lily went on a maternity leave, and that did leave a lag in the leadership. And that lag helped us to see what an important role Lily had been playing as a problem solver, as a cultural broker, and as someone who was always on the lookout for funds that could bring in, for example, an elder or an artist, or help to create a winter camp, or provide more access for the resource development. She did return and was able to settle some of that school community unrest or disconnect. She coordinated summer teamwork, rebuilt the team, a constant inspiration, and continues to direct lots of development in that community. However, like many people involved in alternative programs, became overstretched, but was always there to respond to the needs, just a real sign of her commitment. The elders began to play an increasingly more important role in the community. They were and are and would be considered the keepers of the language. They were providers of vocabulary. They were models of gentle treatment with children. And although they sometimes used English, we discovered that we had to teach them why they had to use Cree. And sometimes their first response would be that, well, the children don't understand, which was true, but it was only through the consistent use of the language with extra supports that they would come to understand it. So we found that when, sadly, one of the elders became sick and had to take a sick leave and was then replaced, we were able to train the new elders into a deeper understanding of what their job was going to entail. And we did see that that led to an increased use of Cree in the classroom. We want, the community wants to see more elders involved and a larger pool of healthy elders. Other teachers began to become involved in the program and involved in teaching the grades 4, 5, and 6, and eventually secondary as well, and teaching Cree for longer periods of time. Other teachers attended the workshops, but were doubters. They did not believe that this was the route to go at the beginning of the program. They were observers and frequently reluctant supporters. Some of those teachers were the ones who felt it was unfair. They weren't getting extra planning time, and the teachers in the Cree bilingual program were. With time, they agreed to teach the program, and then they began to see that the workload was much greater, and how things and the things that seemed not to be fair suddenly were fair. However, some were tired, unenthusiastic, lost, and could not progress and didn't really know how to ask for assistance. Therefore, they used a lot of English, and that led to challenges in the actual overall language development. So what they would need would be assistance, a strong mentor teacher, more workshops, and the sustainability question. Are they ready to take on additional students in these classes? Let's look at some of the key events over the last 7 years as signs of growth in the program. Well, there was gaining support from the community, applying for the pilot project, preparing the pilot project, and having it approved, gaining funding for the elder, funding for an artist, the status of being an alternative program for those who did not want to be in the Cree bilingual program. That is so that parents had a choice. Finding a permanent room for the developer, looking at the school unease and resolving that, reaching the point of having permanent program status, so it graduated from being a pilot project, to the development of a new report card. Community connections. Again, some key events over the last 7 years. There were surveys about the pilot project, and there was a year 1 survey and interviews, and then a year 2 survey and interviews, and then a year 3 survey and interviews, as well as information about the language revival program from Hawaii, another grassroots Aboriginal language program. In year 4, we had survey and interviews and a larger level consultation in that year of unrest. And then, very exciting, there were parts of a winter festival, an annual winter festival that began now to be done in Cree. So the children went ice fishing in Cree. And that was done with members of the community who spoke the language and can do that very fluently. And then year 5 saw surveys and interviews and increased parental support, the big graduation ceremony, and consultation about the expansion of the program, and then some great additional summer activities that began to be offered. Cumberland House is also a famous community for fly-in fishermen and hunters from around the world. And so there is that natural resource, that natural knowledge among the members of that community. And to be able to pass that on to their youth in Cree was really very highly valued among the community members. So as I said, some of what happened was planned, some was expected, some was serendipitous, and sadly, some was disappointing. The most disappointing part would be the oral language development of children. And you will still hear the code switching and translation. However, despite the development of listening comprehension, there were teachers with less understanding of the methodology for teaching Cree in this kind of a language loss setting, resorted to many activities being done in the classroom that were more like coloring activities instead of language development activities. Songs were developed and sung, and that was positive, and that led to festivals and prizes, but it was primarily memorization of the language. The reading that was done was, again, positive in many respects, but it was just decoding. It was without comprehension. Again, this is not uncommon in many bilingual program settings where we move into literacy too soon without having first developed that oral language base. Spelling and writing was emphasized, but that can be done through dictation and wouldn't necessarily require comprehension. So we saw that the vocabulary growth perhaps wasn't as large as one would like. The grammar and structural growth was not at the level where students would be able to use and apply these to their own language abilities. The importance of speaking and how to get students to talk was still not addressed or deeply enough understood, but the community is still facing these challenges and working to overcome them. I don't want to suggest that there was no language development, because children could get on stage and perform. They were able to do work in structured centers using the language. If you look at their writing, they were able to write in daily journals using quite a lot of support or starting sentences. And the teachers who had more experience and were more familiar with the methodology were able to remain self-disciplined and use the language exclusively. There was perhaps an overemphasis on literacy development, but again, that might not be too surprising, because learning to teach an oral language requires some very specific skills. Needs, probably first and foremost, is habit development. Literacy, or the act of reading in any language, is a habit. It's not just the ability to read. It's the practice of reading on a regular basis. The habit of speaking to the children only in Cree needs to be developed, and the habit of the children speaking Cree needs to be developed. From this participatory action research study, going through many, many cycles, we did gain, I think, a number of insights. First, teacher growth. Second, materials development. Third, in the area of children's language development. And fourth, in school community change. Let's look at this in another way. What really happened? I'm trying to point out that all of these areas grew simultaneously, and not that one area preceded the development of another. So there were workshops that helped teachers develop to a certain degree, and simultaneously materials could be developed that matched the level of teachers' development. Then, with that development came some children's language development. Then, alongside that, we see more teacher development, and then more materials development, and then more children's language development. And only after you see these aspects developed do you begin to see school and community change. So remember again that what I'm describing here took place over 5 to 7 years. Development did occur in all areas and continues in all areas. The influence of one area over another is obvious through this diagram. When resources are available and well developed, children are more engaged in classroom activities. Teachers who participate in more training develop better ways of teaching oral language, and as the children's enthusiasm and self-esteem grows, the school and community support increases, which leads to more children's enthusiasm and self-esteem. Enough growth is in all areas, it seems to create a positive synergy. So what accounts for all of these changes? Well, careful planning and hard work. Follow-up by experts and supporters. The multiplicity of activities happening simultaneously creates that momentum or synergy. Time. If we had only 1 year, there's probably no doubt that the project would never have been approved. So you need probably a minimum of 5 years to be able to see the real harvest of planting seeds. The change ladder, increased conscious self-determination, the nurturing of desire within students, within teachers, within families in the community, the conscious attention to the affective filter, the role that pride played, status, creativity, and no doubt the role of hope, that there is a need for the signs of success because that became for the food for more hope. What explains the changes? Well, probably we would turn to systems theory. That is what interconnects the pieces that we seek to understand, and we see that they are often at the affective level. The relationship between the parts has to be positive at all times. Even when something didn't work, we need to find an alternative plan to provide the hope for the sustenance. In this study, the emotive words of the team are the ones that stand out. The emotions are, in fact, the glue. So, what sustained the development? Being asked to use their creativity, that is the teachers and administrators, the learning workshop simulation, the feeling special, the feeling unique. The winning of those awards brought positive attention to the community. Developing confidence with the experience. There were, toward the latter years of the program, many communities in northern Saskatchewan and beyond sent visitors to this community so that they were able to see and share their experiences. The feeling that they were listened to. Members of the community being able to share memories of their youth, and it brought much more joy to all members in that community. The status of becoming a permanent program was a sign of success, and the ability to help others brought potential for sustained development. What does the future hold? Well, commitment continues, skills are growing, hope is strong, the children are ready, meaning that there are young children in the community feeding into kindergarten and feeding into this series of grades. What can we learn from this experience to help expedite the process? Well, the future, in my mind, is the fact that when you attend a community event in this community, you see young children. What influences the successful teaching and learning of a second language? A healthy school environment, learner desire and attitude, exposure to Cree, and helping learners achieve success in communicating in Cree. What is success? Well, how much Cree the children hear, the more, the better. The language should be just at a level higher than what the children can speak. And this is sometimes a challenge for native speakers. They have to learn to rephrase things in simple terms, in simple childlike terms, until the children have a greater language ability. And success also means the level of Cree that they are exposed to, that the teacher should speak at a level of Cree that is slightly above that which learners understand. Oral and written vocabulary must become increasingly more detailed, precise, and academic over time. It also means scaffolding that exposure. And if you look on this website, you can find more information about what scaffolding is. It means that what the children are asked to do in and with Cree needs to be given very special attention. And again, if you look through parts of BSLIM, you'll get a better sense of what that is. The oral tasks that have typically been done in the classroom are repeat, imitate, or complete the teacher's sentence. That needs to be expanded upon to include higher level questions that are being asked, to have students express or represent what they know in a greater variety of forms through the support of artworks, the creation of posters. They have to be able to use their creativity to represent what they know, and then to be able to represent what they know orally alongside what they've represented visually. They have to be able to present or perform and use continuous speech. There's a whole variety of oral tasks that they can engage in, and many of those are also on this website. They need to move from copy work, fill in the blank work, making a list of new vocabulary words, to listening to the teacher read a story, to more storytelling, to answering lower level questions, into more independent use of the language. And again, if you follow BSLIM and you look at moving from getting it to using it activities to proving it activities, this program will improve. So success for a Cree bilingual program means how much Cree the students will hear, the level of Cree that they will be exposed to, and it has to be appropriate to their comprehension level, the scaffolding of the exposure over the course of a month, over the course of a year, and over the years of the bilingual program. It also involves what they are asked to do in and with Cree, and to ensure that we've got a variety of oral tasks and written tasks, and that there is scaffolding within the task, so that each task is divided into small steps or chunks, so that the students have an opportunity to learn something, to play games and get it, and to practice it, and then integrate it into more engaging projects. The scaffolding of the task involves, as I've said, putting the task into small steps, giving students 1 to 2 steps at a time with clear instructions, answering individual questions as they arise, letting students work in pairs or groups, and hoping that they use the target language. And to help with that, you might want to check out language ladders on this website. It might give you some really good tips in that regard. What influences the successful teaching and learning of a language is, of course, that healthy school environment, the exposure to Cree, and teacher knowledge and ability. The teacher knowledge and ability will influence how the teacher teaches, and that includes the school atmosphere, order and support, leadership, teacher content knowledge, how well the teacher speaks oral and written oral Cree, and how comfortable they are with written Cree. The teacher's understanding of learning and understanding of learning a second language in a context where the children do not speak the language. The teacher's repertoire of activities to keep students engaged, and the development of a strong teacher-student relationship. That relationship will create trust, which will in fact encourage students to try and use the language. As far as leadership is concerned, in this school we know that the will is strong. There is an ongoing search for funding. We do continue to need to monitor the use of Cree and to coach teachers in the improvement of their strategies. For teacher content knowledge, the teachers in this community seem fairly comfortable with oral Cree, but we must acknowledge that many of those teachers will retire within the next decade, and who will be replacing them. Probably we need to create and give access to more pleasure reading in Cree so that the teachers can practice reading and develop the habit of doing so, and then we'll pass on that habit to students. And they need more opportunities to use Cree to maintain and develop their own vocabularies. Of course, that's where the elders play a very important role as well. Most teachers seem to think that learning only occurs through repetition, that learners must be told everything and then repeat it many times. And so we have to help them shift that understanding. The teacher's repertoire of activities at this point is a little bit limited, but it is growing, and through the practice and opportunities to observe other activities, I am confident that they will expand their repertoires. There is strong evidence of caring about students within this program, evidence of desire to offer learners support to learn. No doubt. What we need is to develop more trust in the learners, and the learners have to believe in their own ability to use Cree and their ability to behave during paragroup work, and their ability to complete paragroup tasks while working simultaneously without immediate teacher supervision. As I've described what really happened, we saw teacher development, material development, children's language development, and school and community change. We know that we need to get students to talk. The teachers need to have the know-how. There is a need for more resources, and there's a need for guidance, i.e. the zone of proximal development of Vygotsky, which can be read about more on this website as well. Areas of change: teacher growth and pedagogy, school program status needs to remain high, students' language development needs to be addressed, and we need to have ways to continually monitor the cultural growth within the community, the growing identity towards the language, and ultimately if young people, for example, choose to pursue Cree as a subject if they go on to post-secondary education. This will be what will build capacity in this community. From the application to the pilot to becoming a fully integrated program from K to 6 is a sign of the success of the program. As far as students' language development is concerned, it went from no Cree to comprehension to knowledge of songs and prayers, to the ability to read, decode, some writing and spelling, and they learned what was presented to them was of value. That increased self-esteem was also the increased esteem felt towards the language and culture and the people in their community who speak it and who live it. Speaking has been the slowest skill to evolve, but was also not the focus of the instruction. In terms of culture and identity, I think we can see a movement from marginalization to increased self-esteem to better school attendance, which was which can only be positive, can only lead to more learning, to the involvement of more families in the community, to a winter festival that was an annual community event, now having Cree activities offered in Cree and children participating in Cree, to summer activities that are also being offered in Cree. We see that marginalization and exclusion occur when people are systematically excluded from meaningful participation in economic, social, political, cultural, and other forms of human activity. The Cree bilingual program has been designed to give back Cree to the community and to help reduce exclusion and shift that marginalization. Hopefully that this program is seen as an additive bilingual program, and even though the children's level of English is not as broad as that of children in the urban middle class, it has definitely expanded. A participatory action research pilot project had funding goals and continues to need funding goals, but all of the goals that provided funding were met. In closing, the occasional marker, a child who voluntarily speaks the language to a peer or community member, the approval of a grant to fund an elder, the completion of a story with illustrations, the positive attention from another community, the signs of shifts in teacher thinking, these all remind us that there is hope. But the uncertainty of the local conditions, with an ongoing lack of funding, the need for ongoing injections of inspiration to maintain commitment, a paucity of books in Cree, the threat of being satisfied with activities that show progress but do not aim at improving intergenerational language transmission, the need to continue to build a sustainable infrastructure, make it difficult, if not impossible, to predict when the destination will be reached. So if we look at this picture, who speaks Cree? And that is a question of reversing language shift.